left, push the
Pressed it.
button. That
One viewer
button
waiting. Oh, hello. We are live.
special to me.
Brian, we are live. What song was that?
That's a song I just wrote called The Button.
Oh, that was your own song. I thought that was going to
Yeah.
be some indie Canadian hit.
No. Nope. That's just The Button.
Have you considered? Anyway, hi everyone.
Hi. Whoa.
Thanks for joining us.
You know, I got Exclaim magazine.
Is that like Ottawa's like indie magazine about shows around the town?
That was the Ottawa Express.
Okay.
Exclaim is like for the whole, like for Canada. And I'll deliver to your home for free, which I didn't realize, but a friend of mine's partner writes for it. And so
is it like full of ads? It must be just like all ads, right? If they're like making it free.
You know, I don't know. I haven't gotten very far. So I actually have tried to sign up a few times and it finally worked this time. So far, no ads, I don't think. And but like I'm looking at
Who's
the
paying
names.
For this?
I'm looking at the names of all the like, you know, the bands like up and coming. It's like I recognize nobody. And then there's a page where I recognize everybody. And like the theme is like indie rock parents. So it's like all these people from bands that like I've listened to back before I was a parent who are now parents. Like that's the only way I'm allowed to relate to the world anymore.
I mean,
oh yeah, I know these bands. They're parents cool. Too now. Cool.
Well, anyway, thanks everyone for joining us live here. And Joe, by the way, was very upset with us, Brian, that I ended the last show with the joke saying that I was going to post something on LinkedIn, and I didn't. So I just did now. I posted our first ever LinkedIn post from Keeping Karlsson.
Oh my God, what does it say?
I said, excited to record episode 497.
You didn't want to give tips or like, I can't, you know what? I'm not on LinkedIn enough to know like how to like make a joke LinkedIn reference. Like, you know, I knew I could do it. Like,
yeah,
I knew all I did was believe in myself.
Yeah, I think the post would be something like the trick to making a successful podcast is I wake up at 4 a.m. every day. Then I have like a couple hours of meditation. I don't know, something like that of like how to be successful in business.
I also lived with my parents in the basement who hooked me up with an internship for a spot with Spotify.
Sorry, what?
That's
you're saying
that's also like, the story. Yeah, that like didn't a nepotism thing. But that yeah. Nepotism and generational wealth. That's like
Shams, you know, should put short shifts on LinkedIn. Definitely.
When you ask anyone like how they got into what they do, it's like the number one.
But hey, we made this podcast from nothing.
We're like the only. Speaking of indie, we're the only indies left.
Look, yeah, you look at the list of hockey podcasts; they all from a network. Then you see on the iTunes, it's like Keeping Karlsson by Elon Dubrovsky. It's like Sportsnet, TSN, and Elon Dubrovsky and Brian Com. Who the hell are those two? All right, we should start.
Shout out to the other indies. A lot of fancy hockey podcasts. Indies.
Yeah, Fantasy Hockey Life now is presented by like Fantrax.
Oh, congrats. Well, has it not been that way for a while?
Yeah, it's been for a while. I'm just saying. Yeah. We're presented by Dobber Hockey, but we don't say Dobber. It doesn't say Dobber Hockey on our thing. I guess it's more just. I mean, we say we're presented by Dobber Hockey. What does that mean? We just say it.
We Dobber Hockey presents us, and they feature us on their website, and we're grateful for that. So we make sure that everyone listening knows about their website.
It's a good site. All right, let's start the show. I guess we got a couple people in here. We got Trev, who was on the show last.
Shout out to RP, who's always the first like.
Okay.
And
Thanks,
then
RP.
comments first like. I like that. I don't ever know if there's a second like. Like it doesn't seem like a really hot race or contest.
All right, I'm gonna start the show.
Okay, Brian. Shush.
No, it's good. It's good stuff. RP. Okay. FP. Remember FP?
FP Santangelo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
FP.
Okay. I was wearing my Lynx hat today.
Cool. Why not anymore?
I took it off at some point.
Oh, too bad.
I'm inside.
I mean, I'm inside. I'm wearing a hat.
Why are you wearing a hat inside?
Just so like my hair doesn't feel video ready. Like wearing a hat all day. It's gonna be hat hair.
Truth is, like, I mean, you just don't care.
I'll work on it.
Your hair always looks great.
Well, you won't know today.
Well, you have something to keep up.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Yes. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Welcome everybody to the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy
Hang
hockey
on.
podcast.
You should
didn't like
just
that?
we'll just do it. Like you're gonna stitch that together.
Yeah, it's easy.
Everybody.
Yeah, the buddy
Okay.
is a huge pause. The strong
Okay.
B. It's easy.
Is it
edit.
like a BUDDY? That'd
Yeah.
be good.
Yeah. Everybody to the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who are hoping the tail end of this off season for us won't be like the ends of the last season. The players we're going to talk about on the show today. I'm your host, Dylan Dabrowski, and with me to finally get to our Red Boys, Brian, the players who did much better in the first half and the second half of the season, and we need to figure out why. With me to discuss them and some other things, it's my very good friend, the fantasy hockey robot, the IPP MVP himself, Brian Com. Brian, great to talk to you.
Hey, Elon. Hey, everyone. It's great to talk to you too. Yeah, and like you alluded, we're going to be talking about stuff. It's all fantasy hockey related. Don't you worry. If you want to hear us talk about other stuff, we do have a patron cast coming up this Wednesday on August 23rd. And if you're listening to this past then and you're not in on it, you can get archival access to that. And this is going to be our 101st patron cast. It's crazy. It's like an Ask Us Anything episode. So I'm looking forward to that. But don't worry, if you don't want to hear that, then tonight it's hockey, well, fantasy hockey.
I feel like you're like scaring away potential patrons. Like the patron cast will also be about fantasy hockey.
Oh,
like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very heavy on the fantasy hockey. But we got like there's more tangents, more digressions, but like I think they're fun.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, we answer the questions that the patrons post to us. If they want to throw us some curveballs, we're going to take them. But there's some really actually interesting stuff. But this was, we have interesting things for today also. So I'm going to be talking to you multiple times this week, and it's all going to be gold. I'm pretty excited for it. But Brian, let's focus on today's episode and mention a few things before we get started. First of all, of course, Keeping Karlsson, proudly presented by DauberHockey.com. They've got the guide out. It's the best time of year. We've been in contact with Dauber himself. Mr. Dauber wants to come on the show, and we're going to be setting that up. I think in like a week or so, we're going to probably put a post out to the patrons to ask them if there's any projections from the Dauber guide that they want to ask him about, because he came up with all these projections. So that's going to be a really fun one. We've also got a bunch of other things lined up. We've contacted Dom Lucian, who comes on the show once a year. Dom Lucian, who comes on the show every year and is always so fun talking about his projections. He said he's up for it another year. So we're starting to figure out that calendar. Brian, you wanted to share, why don't you share the calendar of what we have coming up? We've got Red Boys today, and then we pretty much have our set of shows mostly prepared, but with some flexibility, of course. But yeah, what do we have in store for everybody?
Yeah, it's really exciting. We're going over, okay, like we only have so many weeks before the season starts, and like we have our Keeping Karlsson off-season standards, and it's about that time, folks, for us to get to them. So of course, we've got Dom, we got Dauber. Hopefully we're going to line both of those up in the near future. Also, the famous harbinger of the fantasy hockey season to come, Schmorgoldi's board is on the schedule between now and opening night. And probably actually that one's going to come sooner rather than later. Like
early
in the
September.
Early September at the latest. And actually from our patron cast channel, where everyone asks us questions, someone asked if we could rank like the top 60 defensemen this year or whatever, like in terms of power play, quarterback, and certainty. And I sent a little note to Elon. I'm like, hey, Elon, is it time for like a defenseman smorgasbord? Like this is like all defensemen who are likely to see top power play time this year. Is it time we tier them for the people? And Elon gave a resounding yes. So we're going to toss that in to the mix of this. We're going to give it a go for the first ever time. I think it's going to be really fun. And then we'll also at some point, look at the Yahoo rankings. Yahoo's been a little all over the place so far, a little more so than usual.
Oh my gosh. There was like 2 days where Austin Matthews had right wing, and they just like went crazy with the positions.
Something was messed up. I think the rumor was that they used like power play position listings to give them their eligibilities. Anyway, we'll see how that shakes out and if it makes a worthwhile. But one way or another, we're going to have like usually the Yahoo rankings episode is us trying to show you who you can get value on. It's sort of like a follow-up on the mock draft episode we did last week. Amazing job by the way, to Trevin Mason, who were on it. But looking at our mock ADPs, we'll have like a month maybe until then we can look at the Yahoo rankings and see who you might be able to find value on late and also early based on the Yahoo rankings and also just what we're seeing. And then, like, of course, on the doorstep of opening night, we'll share our preseason takeaways too. It's all coming. Like, it's still August, but it's all on the way. It's so exciting.
Yeah. Plus, I'm going to have that show with Victor where we go over Calder candidates, another yearly staple. So I'm stoked, Brian. But okay, let's get into today. We've got so much to talk. I still have like more things I wanted to say like before getting into it. Now I almost feel like maybe I should wait until a commercial break or something. I don't know, just because we want to get into the content before. Oh, how about this? Before we get to Red Boys, very quickly, there was like one piece of news that might be fantasy relevant. I want to ask your opinion on, Brian. There was a trade so we talked with the Erik Karlsson trade in the last episode, right? That was bonkers. That was crazy. One of the pieces was Jeff Petrie going to the Habs, which we thought was interesting considering he had like requested a trade from the Habs. So the expectation was maybe that wasn't going to last. And that was correct. He didn't end up lasting with Montreal. He ended up getting traded to the Detroit Red Wings for, what was it, like a pick here? Yeah, 4th round pick and Gustav Lindstrom, who's a guy, like a defenseman who's been in the NHL. So, I don't know how much that's worth. I don't know if we need to get into the fantasy value of Gustav Lindstrom, but Jeff Petrie is definitely not nothing, right? Like, gone are the years. It's been a couple years now since he was like super valuable. There was that one year where everyone was drafting him so high just for him to let everyone down and for him to get like no goals in his first like 30 games of the season. But last year with Pittsburgh, like not too shabby, right? 31 points in 61 games, a 42-point pace. That goes along with 190 hits. Over 100 blocks. So, really valuable in your multi-category leagues. Now he goes to Detroit, where we already, like when we did our episodes after in free agency and stuff, we were trying to discuss about, Shane Gostisbehere going there and if he's going to challenge Sider for top power play. Hronek was getting it, but Hronek's off to Vancouver now. And now Jeff Petrie comes in, who's also someone who's seen his share. Like he had 42% of Pittsburgh's power play time last year. So he's not a stranger to being on the ice with the man advantage. So do you think this just makes things even more complicated in Detroit? What's your take? Does this hurt Sider and or Gostisbehere? Does this help or hurt Jeff Petrie? What are your thoughts here?
Okay, well, I think the first question is, what does this mean for the power play? And my answer is, I think it means nothing, which is what I know I said the same thing when Petrie was briefly a Montreal Canadian again. And we were talking about how great value Michael Matheson was and how Petrie coming there might put a little dent in that. But I said I wasn't going to change where I'm drafting Mike Matheson. And it's too bad I didn't do any drafts in that time where Matheson might have been available a few spots later because of Petrie's presence. But I feel the same about Petrie in Detroit. I think he's got to be like 3rd, maybe even 4th in line to be on the top power play. Because remember, they've got Sider, they've got Gostisbehere. Jake Wallman has done that before, like semi decently. I'm not saying he's ahead of Petrie, but he and Petrie, I'd say, are somewhat, like, I don't know, I'll say equally likely to end up seeing substantial power play time. But that is to say, I don't think either one has much of a chance of seeing a whole lot. I still think this is probably a 2-horse race between Sider and Gostisbehere. And if I wanted to give an early edge, I think I'd still give it to Gostisbehere as being like this power play specialist type. I think the one impact that Petrie could have in Detroit is just like he's going to take minutes away from, like, he pushes someone out of the top 4, right? So that the person he pushes out, I don't know, like, Olli Mata is on the Detroit depth chart. So like he might be like less in the picture. Justin Holl is also in Detroit now. He signed in free agency, for those who don't remember, after spending some time in Toronto. So I think maybe it's like a time on ice situation and those guys lose some peripherals, but you weren't going to bank on them for a whole lot anyway. I guess the other thought, like I think it's really unlikely. Like Moritz Seider is a top pair defenseman in Detroit, but if he falters or if he struggles or coach isn't liking it, Jeff Petrie shoots the same way. So that could be a way to set. But I really don't think that's a takeaway. I'm just sort of digging deep and trying to think about this from as many angles as possible. And since you mentioned Gustav Lindstrom, Elon, I will mention former 2nd round pick of the Red Wings back in 2017, early 2nd round pick. He's got about 130 career games to his name, 25 points. And averaged 14 minutes a night last year. So I don't think that's like, of course, 14 minutes a night in Detroit last year could translate to 18 minutes a night in Montreal. But I'm not expecting like him to really cry. Like the Montreal, the Habs have their decor more or less set, and I think Lindstrom's just like an extra piece. So I wouldn't. That's as much Gustav Lindstrom talk as we probably need tonight.
All right, cool. Yeah, I think another big general takeaway is Detroit's looking like they're ready to go now, right? This rebuild is pretty much over. Like obviously they need to wait for some of their prospects, I guess, to just like, get the maturity agent, Marco Casper and whoever, like, but this team is looking like, they got to Brinkett, so that's a really strong forward that they needed. They've now got Jeff Petrie in there to shore up the defense. So I'm really curious to see, and maybe someone like a Ville Husso, who's probably going to fall pretty far in drafts. Like from our mock drafts, like Husso's not going anywhere near the top, right? And like, especially in Cupful, the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League that we're mocking for, we just gave a little bump for wins, and no one really thinks of like Detroit as like a team for wins, but like I don't know, I think Detroit now could be definitely in the picture. Like if people are thinking like Ottawa's in the picture, like I don't see Ottawa. I don't know, Brian, maybe as a big Ottawa fan, like I feel like Ottawa and Detroit and Buffalo, all these teams that are like on the doorstep that haven't been in the playoffs for a while. I feel like Detroit's like right in there. So
maybe
I'd be interested. I'll just say Husso as someone with like no challenger, like James Reimer is the backup. I feel like he interests me maybe a slightly bit more, just seeing that Detroit's really like going for it here.
Yeah, I feel, well, like there's been a lot of talk since the Red Wings acquired Petrie and Gostisbehere and Comfort, right? Like all these moves that Steve and DeBrincat, all these moves that Yzerman is making has made a lot of people question, like, what stage are we here in the quote unquote Yzer plan? And also, like, do we still believe in the Yzer plan? Like, at what point do we stop thinking like, yes, this guy knows what he's doing and we're putting our trust in our GM? Just because there's kind of a dearth of really impact players outside of Larkin and DeBrincat. Like, sure, you've got David Perron, who, like, I don't know, I'd call it, sorry, I'm starting with the forward group. So like Perron might be in there. Lucas Raymond could grow to be there, but nobody else in the forward core, like, even really has the upside to be an impact player. Like, you got a lot of like middle six players in the mix. And so I think there's sort of like this weakness there. And the defense is more shored up. Like their top four is solid. Their third pair is probably average for a third pair around the league, but it's like there's just like a question of directionality here. Like where exactly, like what exactly is the goal, and like how soon are we hoping to, like, what's the goal for this year? What's the near medium term goal? There's just a lot of pieces moving. So Elon, no, I don't think I'm with you that Detroit is in the same spot to contend as Ottawa and Buffalo. Like, I think if things break right, they could finish ahead of Ottawa and Buffalo. But I think these were three teams who were sort of following the same trajectory. And if you look through the depth charts of each team, I see Detroit as lagging behind just a little bit. Like it just, there's a lot of guys there, but there's not a whole lot of upside. And you just wonder, what are the remaining moves that the Red Wings need to make to put themselves over the top from being this bubble team to being like, yes, they are in the same league as Buffalo and Ottawa. And Detroit fans, tell me if I'm wrong. Like this is just my read of the situation.
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, we'll all find out soon, right? The season will start and we'll see how ready they are. It definitely seems like they're, no longer tanking. Like, that's for sure. Like, they're going to try to be winning games. They're not going to be, trading players at the deadline, unless things like really fall apart. So anyways, wanted to throw it out there that Husso interests me a little more, but maybe you're right that this isn't the year yet for them to, challenge for the playoffs. But okay, Brian, so that's the one piece of news. We've been putting it off forever. We scheduled Red Boys back on episode 493, and this is 497 here. So I think we can get into it. So again, the whole idea here with our Red Boys episode is we did Green Boys already over a couple of episodes where we talked about players who did a lot better in the second half. The reason why they're Green Boys and Red Boys is because I made a spreadsheet where I have the first half and the second half stats, and then I used some conditional formatting where the players with that are really bright and green are the players who did a lot better in the second half and the first half, and Red Boys are the ones who did a lot worse. There's some names that jump out there that I feel like we just don't need to talk about because we've talked about them a lot during the season, and like we know the reasons why they fell off in the second half. Like Bo Horvat, like, do we really need to talk more about how after he got traded to the Islanders, it all fell apart for him? Like Barzal got injured, which obviously didn't help. I think that next year Horvat should do better than he did in the second half of the season, like if Barzal is healthy, just because I like that as a pair. But also, he had 44 points in 39 games to start the year, right, with Vancouver. Like, it was an incredible start to the year. 29 goals, like, in less than half a season. Like, he was pacing for like 60 goals. It's insane. And then the second half, only like a 50-point pace, basically. So he fell off. I don't know if we need to talk much about him, Brian. I'll throw the other two out there at you that, like, we sort of already talked about, like Timo Meier. These are like guys who got traded, basically. Like, Timo Meier was doing so great with San Jose, and then he went to New Jersey and really disappeared. And Brian's already talked a lot about who he thinks a lot of that was just kind of like bad luck, and like he wasn't, the bounces weren't going in for him, and Brian's expecting better in New Jersey. So we've covered him a lot already. Then like Shane Gostisbehere is another one who jumps out, where he was doing really well in Arizona, and then like even like still on Arizona in the second half, once they acquired Valimaki, and I guess the plan was to trade him anyways. They sort of took Gostisbehere off the power play and he started to slow down, and then he went to Carolina and he just, like, all the offense disappeared. So he's another obvious red boy. But I think those three, Brian, I'll throw it to you to say what you want about them, but these are guys that we've already talked to death, or the reasons are obvious. Horvat, Meier, and Gostisbehere.
Okay, yeah. Well, quickly with Horvat, we did talk about it a lot, so I won't belabor it here. Oh, well, we talked about all these guys a lot, and I'm not going to belabor any of them here. But it's really easy for me to just point out, like, Horvat in Vancouver was overperforming. But he was shooting. This is a 10% shooter. He was shooting twice that much in Vancouver. He was shooting just a smidge above 20%, which was helping him be on pace for, like, I don't know, was he on pace for 60 goals at one point? Definitely 40 goals. Like, it was a big total. And while we said we are believers in Bo Horvat and, like, being a quality player, he was still, like, punching above his weight for the stretch that he was shooting 20%. This is at 5-on-5, by the way, because Horvat the last few years has been 15% all situations. So I'm not taking anything away from his power play scoring, which was also fantastic. But at 5-on-5, 20% is a Canuck for Horvat and 5% as an Islander for Horvat. And Horvat as an Islander, by the way, he had 90 more seconds of ice time per night. Okay, so that's a good thing. He was also attempting more shots, putting more shots on net, and had a higher expected goals per 60 than he's ever had in his career. So the good news for Horvat in Long Island is that he actually was much more of a threat than he ever had been in Vancouver. He was being given more opportunity than he was used to getting at 5-on-5, and he was making the most of that. Like, it seems like the Islanders wanted Horvat to come in and be an offensive weapon, and he was sort of submarined by bad percentages. But to me, that's still a sign that, hey, Horvat, who has basically, like, you could set your watch to 60 points from him over all the seasons before this last one, when he paced for 73 points, because that really hot start and a little extra power play scoring maybe might have helped him along the way too. But for me, instead of saying, like, he's that consistent 60-point guy, I'm willing to say, like, 65, maybe even 70 points for Horvat next year, even with, like, just with regular shooting percentages, if he still gets the same sort of usage and leash in Long Island as he clearly had during his time there last year. He also shot, like, only, like, not even, like, 7.5% on the power play in Long Island too. Now, he wasn't getting as many shots off or through, so that's a room for, like, maybe, like, okay, he's being used more as a weapon at 5-on-5 and less so on the power play. But we'll see how things shake out. I still like Horvat more as an Islander than I did as a Canuck. So I can at least end with that, even though it was his time as an Islander that gave him red boy status. Okay. Timo Meier, I think we've totally covered Timo Meier. And I won't even get into numbers because I don't have any to really convince anyone of anything that I haven't tried to already. Like, Meier went to New Jersey, did fantastic everywhere but on the actual score sheet. Like, he looked good, and then, like, there was injury, and, like, was he, like, chemistry, figuring out things with his new team. But things looked really good for Timo Meier, except he was seeing less ice time compared to Horvat, who saw more after he moved. Timo Meier was seeing less ice time at 5-on-5, and that could have been because, finding his place and trying to figure things out, especially having been so cold. His on-ice shooting percentage with the Devils was actually decent. It was 10%, but he was only in on 40% of the goals that were scored while Meier was on the ice. And he's used to being in on, like, participant on 70 to 80% of them. But his shot rates, his expected goals rates, all held steady. So a little less ice time for Meier might take some of the shine off of what we hoped his ceiling could be. Like, in the past couple of years in San Jose. Well, Meier was basically an 80-point player in San Jose this year and last year. And in New Jersey, I'm not sure his upside is quite as high. Like he could definitely still be a point per game player, but I wouldn't be surprised if he fell to like, maybe like a 70, 75 point range or projection, just because there's a lot more sharing to do. That said, if Nico Hischier was an 81-point player last season in New Jersey, I also don't see reason why, like I'm saying, I don't think Meier can't be that. I just think it's less likely that he will be, having to share the wealth a little bit more. And then with Gostisbehere, he's changed teams. So what happened at the end of last year is a little less relevant for Gostisbehere, because he played with Arizona and Carolina, and now he's with Detroit. But he put up some really big production on the power play. But a lot of it also came, either from injuries and being on the top unit, like being showcased, or because he was the only option. And also some of it came from the second unit too, more than it should have. I think Gostisbehere is still like a perfectly qualified and capable power play one quarterback. Like I don't know if you remember, Elon, but like his sophomore season, actually no, his rookie season, 22 power play points in 64 games for Gostisbehere. The next season, 23 points in 76 games. The next season, 33 points in 78 games. These are just power play points. And then he had a down year on the power play, and then he sort of had an uphill climb to reclaim that power play quarterback role and production, because even seeing a 70% share power play time in Carolina, in Arizona, that's great, but it was still like a really weak power play with no one to really finish. So he put up 19 points over 82 games, which is great, and I would hope translates well to Detroit. So I like if Gostisbehere is on the top power play unit in Detroit, well, we've already talked about this. I would hope for at least 50 points, but also marginal 5-on-5 contributions, because I don't think he's fantastic there. I think the Red Wings know that, and I think he's likely to see just third pairing minutes and not get in on a whole bunch. But basically, the second half of the season, more competition for ice time, and some of those second power play points dried up that shouldn't have been coming in the first place, and that's why Gostisbehere was a red boy. So wow, I said I wasn't going to belabor these guys. I probably went deeper than I made it sound like I was going to.
Yeah, I'm thinking like you're shot out of a cannon here. And if these are the guys that we were planning on just like skipping over quickly, then this might be like a 4-hour show, because I have like 12 more people that I wanted to bring up to you. So here we go. Brian, next up that I want to bring up on the list here is Pierre-Luc Dubois, who is another guy going to a new team, right? And we talked about him when he got traded to LA, but I don't think we discussed like how much of a red boy he was last season. Like he had a 56-point pace difference between his first half and second half. In the first half of the season, in 40 games for Dubois with the Jets, he had 47 points. He was pacing for almost 100 points at that halfway point of the season. Then in the second half of the season, he did miss some time, but in the 33 games that Dubois did play, he had only 16 points. He ended the year on a less than half point per game pace. He totally fell off with Winnipeg. Maybe it doesn't matter. He's going to LA, where like LA clearly paid a heavy price for him. So it doesn't seem like they're like concerned they're going to like bury him or anything. Like he's likely going to be on a line with Fiala, you would imagine. Obviously we'll see how things shake out. Is there much to say about like I guess it doesn't matter for next year now that he's on a new team anyway, but I had to point out just like what the heck happened with this guy Dubois to be like paid, like people who traded him like at that moment, like halfway through the season, you must have really felt good about yourself, because that was an ideal sell high, clearly.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't think you should have seen the sell high coming. I did have Dubois in one of my leagues, and I was trying to sell high because he had like a ferocious start. Dubois, 16 goals, 26 assists for 42 points in 32 games. Those 16 goals came on 82 shots, so 20% shooting percentage. Dubois also had 15 power play points in those first 32 games. Overall, this is a 108-point pace built largely from a stretch in mid-December to early January where Dubois had 17 points in 11 games. Like, he was super hot, and it was too hot. But Dubois wasn't supposed to completely fall off from there, which is what happened. And we were so confident that he wasn't supposed to. Elon, I looked back at our notes. This is the keeping Karlsson away. All right. We hold ourselves accountable. On January 22nd, we talked about Dubois 3-game pointless stretch. Elon, you were like, is there anything to worry about? No, there's nothing to worry about. And you agreed. You were like, okay, fair enough. Because that 3-game stretch was Dubois' first 3-game point drought of the year. And that doesn't mean like, oh no, things have changed. It's just like, oh, this is unlikely. It was just the second time Dubois had been held off the score sheet in consecutive games. And to give us some credit, we were right. Like that pointless drought did end after 3 games, and then Dubois rattled off points in 3 straight. But then things really started turning red for Dubois. Another 3-game point drought came right after, and the rest of the season was spotty for Pierre-Luc Dubois, particularly a 2-month stretch where he had just 5 goals, 3 assists for 8 points in 23 games, still taking about 3 and a bit shots per game, but just shooting 7% compared to the 20% earlier, and just 3 power play points over these 23 games, which is a stark contrast from the 15 power play points in 32 games that preceded this red boy moment for Dubois. So like the picture I'm painting here is that Dubois was a red boy this season because his start was way too hot. So that raised the bar too high and really like made it hard to keep up with, even if he did keep up at what we would have expected him to, which is, I don't know, 75 point pace plus or minus 5. And then Dubois' finish was way too cold. And this all added up to a 70 point pace, which, yeah, like seemed fair on the whole, despite how unevenly it was distributed. Like Dubois' full season numbers look pretty in line with past seasons of Dubois. They just came in these strange, unpredictable bursts of hot and cold, which is always frustrating, right? Because when the player's hot or cold, you're like, oh, do I sell high? Do I buy low? And like, no, this was just some random swings that brought us to the exact same destination we've been with Dubois over the last little while. One thing, though, that hurt Dubois and all of Winnipeg, who we're going to get to a couple other Jets, I think, immediately after Dubois, was this brutal run on the power play that basically mirrors the second half crash that Dubois had. Like the Jets power play and Dubois crashed at the same time, figure out the cause and effect there. I'm not 100%, but the first half of the season, Dubois was pacing for nearly 40 power play points. And then in his worst 2-month stretch, Dubois was pacing for 12 power play points over 82 games. And so I sort of like corroborated or took a look. I compared it to how Winnipeg's power play was doing. First half, they were converting on 25% of their opportunities in the first 47 games of the season. In the second half, the Jets were just 16 for 124 chances, converting at 13%. So half as successful on the power play as a team in 35 games. Like I said, this if the power play is seeing a halved conversion rate in the second half, that's not great. And basically in the first half, Winnipeg basically had 14 more goals and a comparable number of opportunities. It's actually 20 more goals, but I'm flipping through samples now. Anyway, you get the point. One other factor here for Dubois and all Jets, and we'll get to those other Jets soon, is like, I think there was like an increasingly mad or frustrated Rick Bowness, but I'm not sure how that impacted the team, because I feel like his whole deal was like, fine, you guys think you've got this. I'm going to stand back and I'm going to let you do it your way and let everything unravel that way. And then I'm going to come in and say, so that didn't work. And now now we're going to start from the ground up next season. I don't think Bowness was really changing things or suppressing or depressing a lot of production. I'm not 100% sure. But I also know that he wasn't supporting the system that was in play as it crumbled. So that's a whole X factor here too. So there you go. Pierre-Luc Dubois, bad second half, overall average season for what we'd expect from him, just came in weird spurts, and some of it led by team-wide outages on the power play.
Right. And now it's a whole new situation for him. So, the whole Rick Bowness factor isn't something we'll have to worry about anymore. And yeah, I'm very interested to see how things go in LA with Dubois now locked in, I guess, as their number 2 center behind Kopitar. So, Brian, we'll do an ad break here, but I'm not going to say it. So, Brian, like you said, I have a couple other Jets on the list. These two are players that are actually going to remain in Winnipeg, but we might as well drop them in here. First of all, Kyle Connor, someone who going into last season was coming off a career year, right? He had 93 points in 79 games, just exploded in that 21-22 season, and he was getting drafted super high in a lot of leagues. And anyone who drafted him that high was feeling like good. Like I made the total right pick here. I'm surprised I was able to even get him at like the 14th, 15th overall pick, because like Dubois, Connor was also crushing it. He had 49 points and 20 goals through the first 40 games. So that's a 100-point pace. Like exactly 49 and 40. He was looking incredible. And again, just like Dubois, like he totally disappeared in the second half. Like he was a 60-point pace, not as bad as Dubois, still rosterable, I guess, but like barely in most leagues. Like if you were banking on Kyle Connor to help you, in your fantasy playoffs, whatever, in that second half, like he just wasn't there. And I guess you've already kind of answered that the power play fell off and this whole Rick bonus thing. So maybe it'll just be as simple as that. And your answer will kind of have already covered it, because I'll throw in the other guy who people are super excited about, right? Josh Morrissey, who really broke out last year. Again, like this isn't as dramatic. Like he was just so incredible in the first half also, right? He had 46 points in the first 40 games, over a point per game for Morrissey, pacing for 94 points. His second half was like a lot worse. Like he had 30 points in 38 games, but that's still like a 65-point pace in his like down part of the season. So that's pretty exciting, just because Josh Morrissey, like, if Kyle Connor next season gets 62 points, we're all going to be like very disappointed, right? But if Josh Morrissey does his, what he did during his Red Boy phase and ends with the 65 points, everyone's gonna be like, that's great. That's probably what I was expecting from him. So yeah, I'm guessing with I don't know. I guess like I've already heard your Dubois answer, so I'll throw it to you. But I'm guessing you're going to say that both of these guys suffered from some bad luck on the power play. But at the same time, there's no way that Josh Morrissey is like a 94-point guy, right? So I'm curious to see where you land on him.
Yeah. So you're right. There's going to be some commonalities, but there's a couple things to pick out about each of these guys. So we'll start with Kyle Connor, who had just 23 points in his final 34 games. And that goes from late January, which is when Dubois crashed, all the way till the end. In that span, Connor had 106 shots in his final 34 games, but unfortunately only shot 6.5% versus shooting 14.5% in the first half, which I think is more reasonable for Kyle Connor. Like, I don't think that's a matter of being unsustainable in the first half. I think it made sense. The piece that might have been unsustainable for Kyle Connor in the first half was his 20 power play points in 48 games compared to just 9 power play points, like one in his last 34 games. So, one power play point in every 4 games down the stretch, which was one of the reasons Connor turned red. Connor's shooting overall was down 3 to 4 percentage points in all situations for the full season, including a power play shooting percentage, which was not even 10%, which normally I'd say, oh, well, that's a big reason to expect regression for the better, right? Like it'll go up. The only reason I'll hesitate for a moment is because that's the second straight season that Connor has barely has not shot quite 10% on the power play. But I think it's temporary. I don't think that's going to be where he stays. Overall, I still expect Kyle Connor to be back at a point per game pace. The one thing for concern for Kyle Connor, though, is that in that late run where he turned red, fewer shots on goal from Connor. He had only 3 shots per game through most like that back half of the season versus having 4 shots per game in the first half of the season and in 21-22. And I just hope that's not a sign of things to come for Kyle Connor. And maybe that's a reason to not put him back quite high on your draft board as he was a year ago at this time. Because outside of that, I'd be like, yeah, just expect him to recover and be okay. But I guess we got to now figure out, like, was the big shooting year that Connor had 2 seasons ago, was that the outlier? But he did it for a year and a half. So it'd be nice if he was able to get back into that swing. But of course, we still have the unknown Rick bonus impact here. But again, like I haven't said explicitly yet, but the power play also hurt Kyle Connor too, or the Kyle Connor hurt the power play. Again, I don't have the causation down here between who made things crash. And of course, the last player that we're going to talk about in Winnipeg who tragically suffered from a weak power play was Josh Morrissey in the back half of the season. Elon, you mentioned he had a 97-point pace early in the season, like through the first half of the year, first 40 some games, and then put up 30 points in 39 games the rest of the season, like in 10 power play points. And that's okay. But still a big change, right? Like that's a huge swing from being I'll just round up to saying like a 100-point guy for a little over the first half of the season to being like a 65-ish point guy for the second half. And, you know, Morrissey also went from nearly 1 power play point to every other game to 1 power play point every 4 games. He was still taking a nice chunk of shots, though, like almost 3 shots per game. And overall, like, this is not a damper for Josh Morrissey. Like, a huge breakout season, 80-point pace on the whole, 16 goals. I believe in Josh Morrissey's near 30 power play points that he put up last year. I think he might have seen some good fortune to pick up 12 5-on-5 goals. Like, he shot nearly 10% at 5-on-5 versus maybe the 5% I'd expect. So, you know, take away 5 or 6 goals at even strength. Also had a 5-on-5 points participation rate above 50%, which is rare for all defensemen, let alone Josh Morrissey. But here's the thing. Josh Morrissey is like still new to this power play 1 role that he's just, you know, come in and blown the doors off. I don't know if I'm sure you remember early days of Josh Morrissey, Elon, where like we were talking about him as someone who could take over the job, but like he never really got an opportunity. But now he has the opportunity, even though Morrissey's already 28 years old. So I guess like there's a lot of unknown here. Like there's a chance that this is new leaf Josh Morrissey. Like he's turned over this new leaf. We haven't seen him in this role before. Wow, so much potential has finally been unlocked. Or this is single year variance for Josh Morrissey. And I guess like I'm going to say something very reasonable and not hot take at all, which is like I'm not drafting Josh Morrissey at that 90, like you mentioned, the 90 odd point pace, Elon. I'm not drafting him at his overall 80 point pace for the season. I think I would be looking like that second half point pace was nothing to sneeze at. And I think he could do a little better than that if the power play finds its game through the season. So I think I'd be looking at maybe a 65-ish point pace. And just one consideration to not put him higher, like if you're optimistic on Josh Morrissey, is Pierre-Luc Dubois and oh my gosh, Pierre-Luc Dubois. Wheeler? Yeah. And Blake Wheeler are both gone. And I mean, Dubois was a key part of that top unit. Wheeler could be a key part of that top unit. And they haven't really been replaced. So like maybe the internal replacement on the power play is Nick Ehlers. You know, we'll as always wait and see what happens with him. You could say that like Perfetti with another year of development or Velarde could step into one of those roles, but no one is directly replacing either of those guys. So maybe that's a reason that everything just, you know, Morrissey can't take a huge step forward or keep up everything he was doing last season.
Yeah, like I think I'm with you, but I do still like feel pretty good about Josh Morrissey. Like I definitely don't think that it was like a 1-year thing. Like I think like he was given a completely new role, you know, or I don't know, he clicked with Rick Bowness, right? Like I think I heard on the Fantasy Hockey Life podcast, they were interviewing a Winnipeg beat writer, and he was talking about how like just Bowness like gave Morrissey like freedom that he didn't have before, to like whatever it is. And he obviously got a lot more power play time. And I think that like, yeah, 65-70 points seems reasonable, but yeah, I'm not going to go crazy and start expecting like a 100-point guy like he was for the first half.
Yeah, I'm peeking at our because in my mock drafts, Morrissey seems to be like the last of a tier that's been regularly available to me. His mock ADP is 72nd overall. He's being picked behind Sergachev. I would prefer Morrissey. He's being picked behind Quinn Hughes. I'd prefer Morrissey because of the shots and maybe some more goals. Like of course, this depends on your format. And then Brandon Montour is going at 67, and they're sort of in a group together by ADP. I guess there's also like there is a little tier here based on the ADP after Morrissey. You've got coming very shortly after Werenski, Burns. So like I don't know. I would be drafting him ahead of some of these guys that he's being drafted behind right now.
Yeah, I think I like him better than all the guys you mentioned, except for maybe Werenski. Actually, I'm pretty I'm like too high, and I took Werenski like high last year, and it burned me. But I like him a lot.
I'm only talking about the guys currently above Morrissey in ADP. But yeah, I agree. I think it would be close. I'd be a little worried about injuries for Werenski, but I do have a lot of faith. I guess like Elon, the next jump, like Montour is the highest of this little tier I'm talking about, 67th. The next tier had like in the 40th, like 40s overall, is going from the lowest to highest. John Karlsson, Evan Bouchard, Adam Fox, Miro Heiskanen. Do you think Morrissey fits in alongside those guys?
I mean, he did last year, but I think all those guys I would take ahead of Morrissey. They seem like sure things a little bit more so. But I guess, Brian, these are all spoilers for our Schmore D's.
What am I doing? Yeah,
We'll save.
we're gonna have to double back on this later, but there's a preview, I guess.
Yeah. A lot of fun looking. But yeah, it will be interesting to point out. Again, we'll have to say that like Morrissey did fall off in the second half, but I do like that the fall off still left him at a 65-point pace, which is really good for a defenseman. That just goes to show how great his season was. Okay, let's go to another team that had a whole bunch of players fall off. Let's go to Buffalo. I've got 3 Red Boys for you and the listeners over in Buffalo. And these are big names. Okay. We're going to start with a guy who's been being taken in our mock drafts generally in the first round or early second. Tage Thompson, incredible season, right? Huge, 47 goals, 99 points in, or paced for 99 points. He had 94 points in 78 games. That's great. Overall, though, when you look at the first half and second half, like very different. The first half, Tage Thompson, people remember this, right? These like 5-goal games, these incredible games. I'm just gonna pause for a sec. Incredible games, Brian. Every time I'm talking lately, like you're always like looking all over. Like, what's going on over there?
I'm so sorry. I'm sure it's very distracting. I don't see. I'm smelling something like a funky smell down here, and so I'm looking for sign. Like I'm in the basement. I'm looking for like I'm a homeowner. I'm looking for signs of like water.
Oh no.
Like it just smells a little. Do
you want to go and like check it out or something?
No, I mean, there's nothing. It hasn't rained for 2 days. Like it rained like crazy for a while. We were without eaves troughs during this insane like 80-millimeter storm, and I was like terrified. Anyway, I don't know. I'll have to look into it another time.
Okay,
I'll try not to look around so much.
No, you can. I was just so curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
And unless it's me, I think I'm good.
You look good. Okay. So what was I saying about Thompson?
Do I smell good?
You look like you smell good.
Thanks.
All right, what was I saying about Thompson? I said he was doing incredibly at those 5-goal games.
Oh no, I was busy smelling.
I'll just start over just in case. Start with Tage Thompson. Like incredible season overall, right? Like 47 goals in 78 games, so pacing for like 50 plus goals. He had 94 points. It was like almost 100-point pace if you average it out. Like just an incredible year, but I don't think people recall like how much more incredible it was. In the first half of the year, Tage Thompson was like destroying the league. You remember all these like 5-goal games. Just like it was like people would be like, I got Taged this week. Like, my fantasy team did okay, but my opponent had Tage Thompson, so I obviously lost. He ended like 38 games into the season for Tage Thompson. If you recall, my break is January 9th. So I was that's where most teams played around like 42 games. So yeah, 38 games for Tage Thompson to start the year, 56 points, 31 goals and 56 points in 38 games. That's a 121-point pace. That was the pace that Tage Thompson was putting up. But like I said, at the end of the year, he ended up with only a 99-point pace. So he did fall off like quite a bit. He only had 38 points in 40 games to end the year. That's a 78-point pace, Brian, which is fine. Like, he had 16 goals in 40 games. So like a 32-ish, 33 goal pace, right? Like this is not the pace of someone that should be drafted in like the first round of fantasy drafts next year, right? Like if you're expecting that second half to be real, and like, and I'm not going to be like super negative, but I'm just to pose an interesting question to you. Like Tage Thompson never was like a 120-point guy like before last season, right? Like going into last season, people would have been really happy with like a point per game, right? But now people are drafting like the year before when he had his breakout that earned him that big contract, he had 68 points in 78 games, which was like good. That's around a 70-ish point pace. Last year, he exploded for the first half, but was kind of similar to that 21-22 production in the second half. So I wonder, is like Tage Thompson potentially a little like overrated? Like, are people like really just like rewarding him for the first half and not remembering how he sort of, got more regular? Though, of course, like I said, there are some other Sabres that we're going to get to that are similar. I'll just throw the names out now. Dahlin and Cousins also were both really good in the first half and then slowed down a bit in the second half. So I guess the question will be, did they slow down because Tage Thompson slowed down? Because there was a point where it was like anyone on the power play with Tage Thompson, anyone that's Tage Thompson was eating because he was doing so incredibly.
Okay, like before I even like give my answer, Elon, I need to know like how much of this are you asking is like podcast host like building up a topic? Like, are we is Tage Thompson for real? And how much of it is like, are you sincerely doubting?
Okay, it's a good question. And the thing is, like, I don't really generally have to think about it because like I'm just asking you. But look, like, let's just look at the ADPs again for our mock drafts, right? Like Tage Thompson is generally going around 14. So like I said, right around the end of the first round, start of the second round. Guys like lower than him, like guys taking next, we're talking like Stutzle, who I guess is like, like that's a whole other situation of like a young up and coming superstar. But then you have like Ovechkin, Marner, like Crosby, Eichel, like guys who are like established, like superstars in the league. Or you could take Tage Thompson, who, had that incredible first half. Like, so I don't think he's like not for real. Like even, point per game in the second half is like very much for real. That's a star. But like, would I take Tage Thompson like ahead of Ovechkin? Like, I don't know. It would be tough for me. I'd be a little nervous, especially after the second half. But I guess you could explain to me if this second half was just bad luck, or if it was a sign of what is more likely to be what he'll do next year.
Okay, so I am sensing some genuine concern and not just like hyping it up for the show and like teeing it up for me to be like, don't worry about it. Okay.
Yeah, like even lower. Like, we
That's
just talked about Kyle Connor actually.
Yeah.
On Winnipeg. Like Kyle Connor's really great and scores a lot of goals and takes a lot of shots. And Kyle Connor's ADP is like 28 and Tage Thompson is 14. So like, Kyle Connor paced overall for the season similar to what Tage Thompson did in the second half. So
there's a clear line in our mock ADPs after Tage Thompson. Like he's on average 14th overall, and then the next is Stutzle and Ovechkin, who are 18th overall, and then Marner, Josi, like also 18th overall. So like there's a consensus top 14, and then the rest are all sort of mishmash. So does Tage Thompson deserve to be in this consensus top 14? My short answer is yeah. I think the second half, like Red Boy, I think that's overblowing what really happened. So let me build up to it for a minute. So Tage Thompson, 99-point pace in his age 25 season last year, which was him continuing to build on his breakout from 21-22, which we thought he would. And on top of proving us right, Tage Thompson shot even more. He took 44 more shots on goal this season than he did last in the exact same number of games, taking his average shots per game down from the low threes to the almost fours, which is so exciting, right? When you see a guy come on like this. So Tage had like a bit of a sluggish start where I don't know. I'm this is the last time I'm ever going to bring it up. I had an opportunity to buy low and didn't, which is a lesson, I think, to trust your projections at the start of the season. Anyway, Tage went crazy. 65 points, 33 goals in 41 games, taking more than 4 shots per night, 173 shots on goal, 23 power play points. That's like a power play point every other night. And he threw in a shorty on top of that. He was shooting 19% on the hole with a 130-point pace. And that includes 6-point nights. Sorry, that included 6-point nights that happened 5 weeks or 18 games apart. And it felt like multi-point nights from Tage Thompson were basically automatic. And then the All-Star break came, and like he was still great, though Tage Thompson's pace slowed to a mere 118-point pace. And honestly, all I see here is that Tage had a rough final. Like the reason I said it's overblown, I'm just seeing like a bad finish to the season. The final 15 games of the season were not good for Tage Thompson. Just 7 points, 5 of them goals in 12 games. He was still shooting almost 4 shots per game. He had just 3 power play points. So the classic 1 every 4 games that all the other strugglers were pacing for. And Tage was also shooting just 11% compared to the 19% he had been shooting for most of the year. But in those last 12 games, Thompson was on the ice for just 5 goals at 5-on-5. He and his teammates were shooting just 6.5% versus 10.5% from the rest of the season. Buffalo finished the season with just 10 power play goals on 60 opportunities. So that's a 17% conversion rate, which isn't as bad as the Jets were, but it's still like anything under 20% is pretty disappointing for a power play. And this cold streak is what brought Tage Thompson down to his 99-point pace. And just a reminder, this cold streak came over like a 12 to 15 game stretch. So
actually, Brian, to even add to that, like Mason pointed out in the chat, and I just went and confirmed, he was actually injured. I should have actually had this information available, but that would also explain, right? If he had this cold stretch at the end of the year, I'm seeing a tweet here from Bill Hop NHL. Tage Thompson suffered, this was back in April when he tweeted this, like Tage Thompson suffered a hip pointer against New Jersey. He also been dealing with a lower back problem around the All-Star break and hurt his shoulder against Ottawa. So it looks like he had like multiple injuries. So I mean, okay, that's almost enough for me.
That's it. And like I'm not sure if any of this,
I take it all back what I said before,
in people's memories, like on draft day at the table. I hope it's in my opponent's memories. I don't know if it will be. Like all systems are still go with Tage Thompson. And Elon, I don't know if you're going to bring up that Mason in the chat is reminding you that last week when Mason was on the show, you agreed with me. I think I was responding to something Trev said that I would take Tage over Ovechkin. You're like, yeah, I'd do the same. And now you're feeling dicey with, like, I guess when you're staring at the data, like I get it, like you're concerned, but I can tell you I'm staring harder and it looks pretty good. It looks okay. Plus this injury context.
I'm with you. Look,
now you're
Brian,
like regretting you ever brought him up.
I'm not regretting anything, of course. It's great content, but like, I haven't done my draft prep yet, so this is all just stuff I'm saying off the top of my head. Like once I actually dive in and prepare for my real life couple drafts here, I'll be all dialed in. I'll be able to tell exactly who I would take over who. But yeah, clearly when I was showing my doubts before, I was getting excited about the narrative I was throwing at you, and maybe a bit too excited because I'm totally convinced Tage Thompson is going to be great. And, you could say the same thing about Rasmus Dahlin, I was about to bring up, because he also had an injury. I'm seeing a tweet here from Lance Lysowski, Sabres beat writer, from April 15th, saying Dahlin confirmed he's been playing through multiple injuries, has yet to give any thought to signing an extension. Okay, but anyways, yeah, so he had been playing through injuries also. Maybe that will explain his red boy status, because Dahlin had his own breakout last season, established himself as one of the top D for fantasy that you can get. He started the year 44 points in 37 games, so almost 100-point pace for Dahlin. So we're catching a trend here with these defensemen, because similar numbers as Josh Morrissey was putting up to start the year. And then Dahlin ended the season with only a 58-point pace, just 29 points in his last 41 games. But maybe, he had injuries also at the end. And also, if Tage Thompson was having injury issues, even if Dahlin was healthy, that's obviously going to reduce his, if you're playing with a superstar like Thompson, then that's going to help the top power play defenseman that gets a lot of ice time to also get a lot of points. So assuming that both of these guys are healthy, can we be confident that the start of the season, Dahlin is for real, which would maybe even make, because he ended the year with a 77-point pace. He's being drafted that way. I'm saying, but maybe he is better. Maybe we should be looking at him as closer to a 90-point guy.
Yeah, I think, 90-point guy is what Dahlin was for the first 55 games of the year. 62 points in 55 games, including 14 goals. He was shooting 9%, had a couple shots a night, a few shots a night, 157 shots in 55 games, and 27 power play points in the team's first 62 games for Rasmus Dahlin, which was huge, right? This was a nice step forward for Dahlin. It wasn't that long ago, 2020, 2021, when Dahlin had a 36-point pace, and that was just a bad time. And Taylor Hall, Jeff Skinner, Tage Thompson, Jack Eichel would all agree that team was not a good time. And even since then, Dahlin had bounced back. He'd been in the mid-50s for 2 of 3 seasons, then shot up to a 77-point pace last year on the whole. But then, so this is good. Dahlin is tracking the way we'd hoped. He finally took that step forward. Of course, that 77-point pace on the whole is less than the 92-point pace that he had through 55 games. And really, he lost those extra 15 points thanks to a cold stretch that started in March, pretty much lasted the rest of the season. 21 games, a goal and 9 assists for just 10 points in those 21 games. He was only taking a couple shots per game, which is a little concerning. And again, the power play was not going well. He was also only shooting 2% himself. But Dahlin's power play struggles align very well with Buffalo's power play struggles. And honestly, I think that's it. Numbers on the whole look reasonable for Dahlin. If I'm looking at the full season, nothing his full season data, nothing stands out as being oh, that's not likely. So that tells me that there was some bad luck for Dahlin in March and April, maybe some very good luck in the first half and a bit too. So overall, I'm curious to hear how high you're going for Dahlin. I think his upside could be above 80 points. It could be almost touching 90 points. But when I'm drafting Dahlin, I'll probably still I think the over-under number is 72. Where do you have Dahlin, over or under 72 points?
Yeah, give me the over. I think I'm pretty high, especially now that you've made me feel great about Tage Thompson. Give me the over. Honestly, Cale Makar, Roman Josi, and then Dahlin, I think.
I think that's, your other options are Dougie Hamilton, who I think is maybe more certain, but perhaps less upside. Erik Karlsson is probably your only, I don't know, is Evan Bouchard, Heiskanen, Fox. Those guys are all in this territory, but I don't know that any of those guys, I'm going to say something crazy here, Elon. I think the only guy who has the same upside as Rasmus Dahlin in that group could be Evan Bouchard.
No, that's not crazy. Like we're all very excited to see what Bouchard's going to do on
Yeah.
that top power play.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's the Sabres. Oh yeah, I did want to bring up Dylan Cousins also, who just got ranked in our. Thanks again to Andrea, one of our awesome patrons who's been so helpful this year with a lot of things. And Andrew's been running our patron rankings, 100 days of voting on who should be ranked higher. I guess now that we have the ADPs, it's like now we have 2 different lists you can look at to try to help you. A lot of fun stuff going on over on our Discord. But yeah, Dylan Cousins just got ranked. So he's cracking the top 100 for the first time in his career. And why not, right? He just had a 68-point season, 68 points in 81 games for Dylan Cousins, who's still like super young, only 22 years old. But yeah, he is a red boy. He started the year 37 points in 38 games and then ended the year only 31 points in 43 games. So that's going from point per game to like around a 60-ish point pace in the second half. And I know Cousins was like locked into the top power play for a lot of the first half of the season. And then like there were a lot of games where he wasn't on the top power play in the second half. So that's what makes me more nervous about him than someone like a Dahlin or a Tage Thompson, just because, you know, you've got that top line, first of all, which, you know, was really good for a lot of the year. I know like things got shifted around a little bit at the end, but generally you had Tuck, Thompson, and Skinner, which means Cousins has to already not be on the top line. And yeah, who knows if like a Jack Quinn or like who knows if the Sabres have a million prospects, right? So who knows who is going to get that a 4th top power play spot as a forward. Maybe it's not Cousins. So I don't know. This is hard to predict, but anyways, do you have an answer to like why he was a red boy beyond just like maybe less power play?
A little bit. Yeah, like he had 52 points in his first 57 games, 15 power play points, and then Cousins followed that up with just 16 points in his last 24 games, with 3 power play points. So 1 power play point every 8 games instead of 1 every 3 games. So that is, yes, Elon, like you're right. That is the big explanation here. He also had his line mates change though. Hinestroza, he was playing with Hinestroza, Vinny Hinestroza and Casey Middlestat for a bit. But none of like next year, I'm hoping like he is most of the year. Cousins was playing with like Jack Quinn and JJ Paterka, and both of those guys could be taking a step forward along with Dylan Cousins. So that could be really interesting to see all of those guys grow together. Of course, Jack Quinn is out with a ruptured Achilles, though, possibly through to the end of this calendar year. So I'm not sure who exactly his line mates will be, but I still expect Cousins to be like nicely situated in the depth chart. Also, like he might be competing with like Victor Olofsson for top power play time, although I assume like he did pretty well on the power play last year, and I would hope that he could continue or grow that role this year. Overall, last season at age 21, Dylan Cousins had a 69-point pace, and he did see more time on ice and more power play time, established himself as a top 6 forward, finding his stride, great at creating offense, still definitely has some work to do defensively though. And so for next year, am I ready to count on 70 points? I'm not ready to count on it. I'm not going to rule it out either. But I guess we'll see if he and his line mates, so JJ Paterka, perhaps, and we'll see who else he starts the season with, can find the same shooting success, or maybe they do see some regression as a group. But there's also going to be some natural growth coming from Cousins and perhaps his line mates. So I think what I'd like to do with Cousins on draft day is I'd probably expect 60 points and be pleasantly surprised if he does better. There's just a bit of a ceiling as like a second line center there, and a second line center on a team that doesn't have like a whole lot of great options. Like if I'm to assume that Skinner, Thompson, and Tuck are playing together on the first line, there's just, you know, like Cousins and Paterka had something, Quinn had something going for them last year. I'm just not sure how reliable that something is, and that's one of the reasons that Cousins might have been a red boy over the latter half of the season, along with the power play challenges.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you. So he's obviously someone that's a tier below, obviously worth drafting in your leagues, but not a sure thing by any stretch. Okay, Brian. Before we move on to our next Red Boys, I do want to point out, we were planning on this episode and we kind of just forgot about it and all the excitement. I did want to mention some things about the Keeping Karlsson Patreon program. So if people don't mind, really quickly, we got a lot going on, right? Like we are fast approaching the deadline to register for the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League. So if you're not in yet, first of all, if you played last year and you're planning on coming back and you've like earned a spot, you still have to like officially register on our Discord. So please go make sure to do that so you won't lose your spot. The deadline is September 1st. If you register after September 1st, we can't like guarantee you a spot. Okay. Like anyone who registers, but like from if you played last year or if you're brand new, if you register before September 1st, you're like guaranteed a spot 100%. After that, we might still be able to get you in, but then we're gonna have like wait lists, and we'll see if we can build more leagues and all of this. So definitely, if you're listening to this and you want to play in our awesome league, which we've talked about all summer long, right? But you can go to kkupfl.com for info. It's a whole tiered league. You'll start in a bottom tier, and if you do well, you'll climb up. You're playing against other really intense fantasy managers, and we're like managing this league and trying to make it as great as possible. I highly recommend it. I won't go too crazy about it, but you're running out of time. So I just want everyone to get in that wants to play, especially people who earned like, high tiers last year. I definitely don't want you to lose your spot that you've earned. We've had a summer promotion going, right, of letting any people be in our Patreon and get all the perks, including being in our Discord and all of that for like $1 a month. So that's like coming to an end as the season's about to start. So please make sure to convert back to an amount which is like $5 a month US is our tier. We're not like one of these crazy Discord or Patreons, where we're like having a million different tiers and different rewards we give to different people. We give everything we have for this $5 a month. So hopefully people find that worth it, right? And that gets you in our Discord where we're having a lot of fun. It lets you play in the cupful and a bunch of other perks. You can check that all out at patreon.com.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing. If you sign up for we just turned on this new feature. Well, it's new to us on Patreon. So like if you sign up for the whole year, like if you plan to play in the cupful, you'll get I think it's an 8% discount on like patronage. It's basically like you'll have 1 month free is what it comes out to, if you want to sign up as an annual patron. So that's an option no pressure. You do what works for you. It's just out there in case you wanted to know about it.
All right, so wanted to throw all that out there.
And thanks for all your support. Thanks for the support of everybody who's a patron. Thanks for everyone who's listening. And if you're listening and not yet a patron and you want to be, that's great. We'd love it. And if you're not, that's also cool. We're happy you're here with us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no need to feel bad if you're not a paid. I listen to some podcasts that are like, but I guess these are podcasts that like are funded by, I don't know, like I don't want to name names, but they're like, they really like go hard at the start of the year, like like the reason we're able to put together these amazing stories is because of our supporters, and like 99% of the listeners are like freeloading and only 1% are supporting our great work. Well, anyways. Whatever. Maybe they don't go that high on me.
Those numbers aren't accurate for us. I think it's like 95% free. No, I'm kidding. Whatever. If you like the show, you could support us however you're able to. Thank you. You're great.
Ad break there. So Brian, we got some more Red Boys to get to. Okay, so let's dive in. We're past the Jets, we're past the Sabres. I think we're down to mostly like just one player per team moving forward. I want to go to Philly next. Okay, Travis Konechny, who like really perplexes me. I was doing a mock draft recently, and it was like I think my 5th round pick, like somewhere out there. And I was just like looking at players sorted by their points per game from last year in the cupful, and like Konechny was so like high above everyone. Like he seemed like such a clear pick, and it's just like I couldn't bring myself. I think I did end up picking him, but it's a mock draft, right? So there's not a lot of high stakes. I don't know if I would have been able to do it that high in like the real cupful, just because he's been good like before, right? Like back in 2019-20. Konechny had 61 points in 66 games, very similar to this past season, 61 points in even fewer games in 60 games, which was his first ever above point per game season. He was shooting a lot. He was above 3 shots per game. He did miss that time, right? But overall, it's a great season. And kind of like a lesser version of Tage Thompson, Konechny was like even better for stretches, right? Like if you look at the start of the year through 35 games, Konechny had 43 points. He was outpacing for over 100 points. He was destroying. And then he got hurt. He missed time, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, he came back in his final 25 games, only 18 points, which is like a 60-point pace. I wonder how much of that had to do with injury, how much of that had to do with Philly being like absolutely terrible. And I don't know if that's going to be any different next year, but I know that they're going to try to not be absolutely terrible next year. I don't know. Like, who knows what's ever happening with Philly? They always like suffer from so many injuries, but maybe they're going to have some guys back and like the Couturiers and the Atkinsons that could help someone like Konechny. I just have no idea what to project this guy for. Is he a point per game, like superstar player now, like potentially even higher based on what he was doing before he got hurt? Or is that like a bit of a mirage, and it would be very risky to take him like super high, expecting him to even be like point per game?
I don't at all blame you for being confused about Konechny. And Elon, I also find him dropping to me in the mocks. And like basically I'm being dared to take him. And he'll even be at the top of my queue based on his performance from last year for like a couple rounds, not just like at the top of the default queue, but the top of my queue. And my game has sort of been like to see, okay, how long can I wait to take Konechny? His numbers are a bit of a Rorschach test, and you're going to see what you want to see. Really, there's enough to interpret Konechny both ways that he's shown us who he is, and I'm choosing the favorable one. But I think you could be just as justified picking the unfavorable one. But just to like look at the history and what we're dealing with here with Konechny, in 1920, he had that breakout season where Konechny paced for 76 points. That looked real. And then he followed that up with 2 55-point pace seasons, which also were like, what? Like, why isn't Konechny still doing the thing he's doing? Maybe I was wrong. And finally, this past season, Konechny provided the sequel I was expecting a couple years later to that breakout a few years back. 3 seasons later, to be exact, with a re-breakout for Konechny, where he put up 83-point pace at age 25. All right, so he's still young, right? This is still a player developing, growing, getting better, maybe about to peak or already peaking. The end for Konechny was bad, where he turned red. He had just 11 points in his final 23 games, still taking 3 shots a night, but wasn't great. And this is, by the way, excluding Konechny had 4 points in Philly's final game of the season. I'm leaving that out because the stretch before this, half point per game or not even, was bad. And Konechny had just 2 power play points over those 23 games. All of Philly was trash during that stretch. So just 10 power play goals and 77 opportunities for the Flyers in their last 34 games. It's a 13% conversion rate. Very bad. Konechny was also shooting 7.5% versus shooting 20% earlier in the season when he was doing well. And the thing with Konechny is that when I bring up those 2 numbers, like those 2 percentages, it's hard to read which one is the one that I can buy into. Like it's hard to read Travis Konechny completely, which is why I said it's a bit of a Rorschach test. His good years have seen good percentages, and there's been enough good percentages to think that Konechny is a talented shooter and converter, and it's not just variance. But there are also some lean years too, where you might be able to buy in. It almost reminds me, like, not to quite the same scale because the upside wasn't the same, but Anders Lee for a while was just like back and forth between like, yeah, he's really good, and no, he's not. And there was enough of a sample of him being both good and bad, or sorry, good and really good, that you couldn't really figure out which one to pick. And that's where we're at with Konechny. And like I said, I'm going to like to see the good side of Konechny here. And I think he could approach a point per game pace again this season, keep taking a whole bunch of shots. I am curious to see, like, he was the guy, the only guy in Philly. And I think that's one of the reasons that the power play struggled towards the end of the year, but he was it in Philly. And we know that Cam Atkinson and Sean Couturier are likely to return. And they'll also have a new power play 1 quarterback in Philly this year, now that Tony DeAngelo is out of the picture. So I am curious to see how all of that impacts Konechny, and whether that's going to muddy the clarity of what we can gather from Konechny's play. But if I'm going to take a guess, I'm going to guess that Konechny is going to be closer to a point per game pace this year than, say, a 70-point pace.
Okay, cool. So then in that case, he's maybe worthy of going as high as these potential rankings. So yeah, I wonder if I'll have the guts to take him. I like him. Like, you know what? I think he's a really good player. There was times at the start of last year where I remember on the podcast saying to you, Brian, like, Travis Konechny's for real. Like, look at this guy. He's doing it. And I think we were agreeing. And then, yeah, it's just Philly's always also just such a tricky place where you don't want to draft someone too high just because that team always seems to fall apart. But okay, next Red Boy on the list. We're going to Boston now. So we've talked a lot about them, right? And how things are going to be super different next year, right? Taylor Hall's gone, but more importantly, Patrice Bergeron's gone. Like, but they still have Pastrnak, and they still have David Marchand, and they still have Pastrnak, and they still have Brad Marchand, though Brad Marchand was a different guy in the first and second half because he is another Red Boy, right? Marchand was good to start when he, got started. He had 37 points through 32 games, was doing his typical Marchand thing, pacing for around 95 points. And then in the second half, yeah, he really turned into someone else, like something Marchand has never done, like fell below point per game, like significantly. He only had 30 points in his final 41 games, which left Marchand with only like 67 points in 73 games on the season. So like a 75-point pace. And he's falling. Like, this is a guy who like not too long ago was easily getting drafted in the top couple rounds in Cupful year in, year out. Now I'm seeing him getting drafted. Like, yeah, it's like a tough decision actually between him and Konechny. It's around that spot where I think I was deciding between those two. So maybe that's a fun sub question we could even discuss here. But now going into next year, it's like, what happened in the second half for Marchand? And also, like, we have to add on to the fact that now he doesn't have Bergeron to play with. So I'm very curious to get your take on if you think that second half Marchand is now what we have to expect moving forward, or if he's going to be a steal in drafts and people are going to be getting him super late. He's going to go right back to being his 90+ self.
Yeah, lots of unknowns around Brad Marchand this year. And unlike Konechny, where we have like samples like of good and bad, and the situation isn't so different this year, the situation is really different for Marchand this year. So yeah, like I'm not even sure. I don't know I'm going to be able to give you a satisfying answer here, but like just going and looking at the season Marchand is coming off of 75-point pace. That was his worst since 2015-16 when he had a 65-point pace. That was on Marchand's way to breaking out and having fantastic seasons every year until this one, which was still a good one, but not fantastic. But Marchand in the second half particularly struggled beginning around the All-Star break. 21 points in his final 33 games, taking almost 4 shots a night, which is promising, but shooting just 6.5% and only 1 power play point every 5 games. So that's not characteristic. Before that, Marchand had 46 points in 40 games, was actually taking fewer shots per night, like just less than 3, but was scoring on 15% of the shots that he did take, had 23 power play points, so more than a power play point every other night, and on a 94-point pace, which is right in line with what we'd expect Marchand to be doing. So meeting expectations for the first 40 games or so, then falling off in the second half. Now, the Boston power play, like there's a theme here, like the Winnipeg power play and the Buffalo power play. During Marchand's cold stretch, Boston had just 18 power play goals on 117 opportunities. That's a 15% conversion rate, which is basically half of what was happening while Marchand was hot, when Boston was converting on 27% of their power play opportunities. So really, when I'm not sure what to do here, I can just zoom out, look at Marchand's full year numbers. I think he was probably just a victim of some bad variance. I really do. And I wouldn't count him out based on that second half. As you said, Elon is a really interesting guy at the draft table this year, minus Bergeron and Krejci. I even went to see, like, okay, well, how'd Marchand do in the playoffs without Bergeron? He had 4 points in 4 games. So, like, he can do it. We don't doubt he can do it. Bergeron's been injured plenty in recent years, and we weren't like, oh no, Marchand's in big trouble now. Of course, he's older now, but I don't see any signs of him really falling off. Now he's going to be with like Zacha and DeBrusk, which is who he had those 4 points in 4 games with during the playoffs. So, I mean, in our ADP, Elon, it's funny because like we just talked about Konechny. Brad Marchand is going, Konechny's at 58. Marchand is at 60. And
yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah. So who would you take between the two?
Yeah, it's really tight. Honestly, I think I would take whoever I think is least likely to be around at my next pick, which I think is probably Marchand. I think, yeah, it's tough. You know what? I think Marchand's downside is higher. Like, and by that, I mean, sorry, like the worst case scenario for Marchand is still like a better production outlook than the worst case production outlook for Konechny. So I think I'd go with like Marchand as like the old reliable. But I'm also seeing Konechny in the last 5 mocks for some reason has dropped like 12 draft spots. Like overall, we're in mock 30 right now, roughly. Overall in all mocks, he's been 58th. Konechny's been 70th in the last 5. And nothing's changed.
Well, I guess maybe what's changed is people are starting to, I don't know, maybe there's like other players that now they're getting more excited about it. So he's falling for that reason.
There's been like very little news about all the guys in that neighborhood. It's a really interesting, so I would take Marchand because I think I might be able to sneak Konechny later, but I'd be a little happier with Marchand on my team than Konechny. How about you?
Yeah, I'll just take Marchand also. Like Konechny also would randomly get. I remember even in the year when he really popped off, he would sometimes just lose top power play. I know it's a new coach, but it's Tortorella, right? Are we really going to trust him that much? Like Marchand is guaranteed to be getting like primo deployment, and it's not going to happen. Guaranteed for Konechny. So that would be the one reason why also I'd be a little nervous. Like, like if you look at Philly, they have enough people to fill a top power play without him, right? Like if Couturier and Atkinson are back, you got Owen Tippett, you got Farabee, Morgan Frost. Like who knows what Tortorella is going to do. But I do like Konechny, but I'll take Marchand also. Okay, next up, Brian, let's go to Minnesota. Let's go to another superstar, okay? Kind of a la Tage Thompson. Kirill Kaprizov really slowed down in the second half of the year, right? He started just as good as what people were expecting when they drafted him. He was pacing for 100 points. He had 48 points through 39 games. Then the second half, basically down to point per game. He had 27 points in his final 28. He brought with him Matt Zuccarello, which wasn't very nice of him, but I guess that's what happens when you live by the Kaprizov. You're going to die by the Kaprizov. And Zuccarello went from like looking like a draft steal because he was falling because he's so old and like so like line dependent, and he was doing great, right? He had 40 points in 37 games. We're talking about Zuccarello now, with Kaprizov being a 100-point guy. Zuccarello was pretty close, like around a 90-point guy. And then in that second half when Kaprizov fell to like a 80-point guy, that led to Zuccarello falling to like a 55-point guy. Only 27 points in 41 games to end the season for Zuccarello. So going into next year, like I don't really see a reason to not expect them to like play together again. I don't see like another person that Minnesota has acquired or anything that makes me think like Kaprizov and Zuccarello won't play. Like I guess like Boldy could like work his way up, and like if Zuccarello's starting to struggle just with age-related regression. But just to make this easy, maybe unless you really disagree, let's like assume Kaprizov and Zuccarello are going to play together again. And if that's the case, did something happen in the second half that we have to be concerned about, or do you think it's going to go back to being like Zuccarello's a huge draft steal and Kaprizov is a sure thing, like 100-ish point guy? You don't need to worry about him.
I think Zuccarello. Oh, sorry. Did you say Kaprizov is a sure 100-point guy, or did you say Zuccarello?
I said, is Zuccarello going to be a huge draft steal, and is Kaprizov like a sure 100-point guy?
Okay. Sorry, just give me a sec. I wasn't. I can do this. Okay. Calling Kaprizov a sure 100-point guy is tough. I don't think he's quite there. I didn't really see like a huge cold stretch or anything like really substantial that I could dig into from his numbers. Like he was injured. He was a little quiet in and around that injury, even though like Kaprizov took like a lot of shots in some of those games. But it was pretty rare for Kaprizov to go 2 consecutive games without a point. And so for that reason, I like he had 92 points, paced for 92 points last year, paced for 109 the year before. I guess the question is which one was real? I don't know. And I'm sorry. That's really unsatisfying.
I could give you an answer.
Okay, what do you think?
Which is of course my opinion.
Yeah,
and,
what do you think?
As Mason has shown, like my opinion might change from episode to episode, but I definitely am high on Kaprizov. And I think he's a 100-point guy. Like I think that I'm not too worried about him.
The circle I'm trying to square, I've always wanted to say that. I don't really know what it means. But is Kaprizov saw more time on ice last year and paced for fewer points?
But he was a red boy. He was pacing for like 100. Like he was doing fine. Then he had the injury.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So maybe it was just the injury and the lead up to the injury. Like I'm willing to just write it all off to that. Like his percentages, like his output, like per 60 minutes was like sort of similar, but his on ice shooting percentage last year was 8%. The year before in the 100 plus point pace season, it was nearly 12%. And here's where I'm going to tie into Zuccarello. Okay. Because Zuccarello in his final 24 games this season was shooting just 3.5%. And Zuccarello had shot 15% in his previous 3 years since coming to Minnesota. Since coming to Minnesota. Hang on. So I'm a believer that Zuccarello can recover. And in the first 54 games, Zuccarello was shooting 14%, and pacing for just over a point per game while the Minnesota power play was healthy. And of course, while Zuccarello was struggling, the Minnesota power play was unhealthy. I don't know what the deal was, like if this was normal, but we're basically uncovering all these teams who were converting at like 15% over the last third of the season, say, like or a quarter of the season. So yeah, like this is Zuccarello fell back down to a 70-point pace last season at age 35, which he'd been putting up about every other season for the last 5 or 6 years, except in his off years, Zuccarello would go lower than 70 points. But this time, Zuccarello was coming off that 93-point pace effort, which looked mostly real. And I still, like, the question for Zuccarello to me, well, okay, first thing why Zuccarello turned red, I think, was the power play. Second reason was Kaprizov was out. Third reason was the shooting percentage was down. All right. So now it's like, well, can Zuccarello get up to the 93-point pace? Because we expect all of those things to likely go away. But he's turning 36, right? This is his age 36 season for Zuccarello. I think that 70-point pace was unfair to him last year. I don't know if he can get all the way up to like 93. I think the over-under is probably like 81.5 for Zuccarello, which, by the way, I think makes him great draft day value. I think a lot of folks have written him off as being like maybe a 70-point guy and falling. Elon, actually, I have if you don't mind me like bringing up a Discord conversation. We had
it's like, private. You have to be a patron to hear that,
Brian. Okay, we'll consider this a little treat. Justin asked in like, we have an ask and answer section where you can ask a question, get everybody's like your own little forum post or channel is made. Everyone answers. Elon and I will absolutely, for sure, 100% answer, but you'll also get everyone else's opinion. But Justin was asking about a keeper league, and he presented his keepers, and basically he had a round 16 Matt Zuccarello or round 8 Matty Beniers. And you, like, there were other guys, but basically you said you were going to let go of Zuccarello at round 16. And I thought it's similar to full scoring. And I thought like I might drop that round 8 Matty Beniers. And I've had a couple people agree with me since I mentioned that. And I was wondering where you stood on that take.
I would find it hard to drop Beniers like in a keeper league like that. Like, I just feel like his upside is so like he just won the Calder. He just had like a 60-ish point season, 60 plus 65 point season as like what and as a 19-year-old. So I don't know. I just feel like maybe for next year, like I could agree with you that like you're getting good value for next year by keeping Zuccarello, but Beniers could be someone that you end up keeping for a really long time, like as a star on his team. And I know you might be thinking, oh, but Seattle, I didn't mean to do that voice, but like Seattle, like spreads the offense around, but like this is, that might not be the case in like 2 years from now.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Like that's the whole guess. And with Zuccarello, like, I don't know. I just figure with round 8, maybe you can find a replacement for Beniers. Like, you're not going to replace point per game value, or it's unlikely that you'll find it that late in the draft where you got Zuccarello and Beniers. Yeah, I think there's a ceiling based on Seattle, especially because they split power plays. Like Beniers, like I saw less than a 50% share of the team's power play minutes last year.
Yeah, but he was 19. Is the only
thing, for sure. But the team, like, I don't know. I could see them splitting 2 units. I could see them making sure that nobody, like it being a Carolina situation. And the question is, like, is Beniers as good as Aho? Like, will he get to point per game? And if he does, is that good enough? Like, of course, you want to know who else is available around that 8th round pick. But I just, yeah.
No, I don't mean to come off like you're wrong.
You're
like,
not.
Anything like
no,
that.
You're not at all. I think I expected you to prefer Beniers, not only because you already said you would, but like you also do. It's funny, sometimes you have a longer term outlook than me and sometimes not. I think since you become a dynasty player, you have that longer term outlook than me.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Like, I just feel like on one hand you want to focus only on the year and winning, but like, is the difference between Matty Beniers and Zuccarello like that different to like give up the 20-year-old like Calder winner versus the, the like 35, 36-year-old, like just waiting to be bumped from the line. He could at any point like lose a step and be bumped from the line with Kaprizov and become a free agent. Like if the as soon as the lines change in Minnesota and Zuccarello's off the Kaprizov line, we're totally gonna be having a conversation of like, so do we drop Zuccarello? And I'm pretty sure the answer will be yes, right? Unless it's like, well, maybe wait and see, make sure that it's permanent. Maybe he'll get back on the line with Kaprizov, but like, he's totally line dependent as far as I'm concerned in terms of any fantasy value. So it's a little bit. So I don't know. Like for someone like that, I don't know, but I do agree with you that he's probably good value in a lot of leagues.
Like, yeah, for sure. So
okay.
So I think point per game. That's where I landed on Zuccarello. Okay.
And I draft him as like a 70-ish point guy just to account for
with upside.
Age. Yeah, with upside and downside.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go to your Ottawa Senators, Brian. Jake Batherson is a guy.
You said Jake Batherson.
I meant I split halfway through, but okay, yeah. Drake Batherson is someone who actually Trev, who was on the show last week, asked for. We already had him on the list, of course. But yeah, Drake Batherson, another Red boy, right? He was someone who we came into the year, we didn't know what was going to happen with the Sens, right? It was like they had brought in all these like Giroux and DeBrincat, and we didn't know how the power plays would work out. And Batherson is someone who like anyone who like he was falling in drafts. I think when we were like ranking the 6 guys, a lot of us, I think I might have had like Batherson's like the 6th of the 6 like exciting forwards on the team going into last year. And like at the start of the year, he was really proving those people wrong, right? 37 points in 40 games to start the year for Batherson, which is like a 76-point pace. It was looking like he was going to have this like incredible season. And then he like really went AWOL. And I'm really curious to know why, because this isn't a power play thing. Like I'm seeing he was on the top power play like all season long. Yet in the second half, Drake Batherson only 25 points in 42 games. So that's like less than a 50-point pace. So Batherson went from like a stud to someone that maybe wasn't even worth holding on fantasy rosters. So now going to next year, we like it's because Ottawa once again is super stacked. DeBrincat's gone, but Tarasenko's in, so you could call it a wash. Josh Norris is healthy. So they're going to once again have a lot of competition for spots, but also like really good players for Batherson to play with, no matter which of the top 2 lines he's on. Brian, what happened? How did he go? This must be something that was discussed in Ottawa media, right? Like, where did Drake Batherson go in the second half?
Sorry, my unmute button. Okay, I got it. Yeah, it was. I'm not sure with like so much nuance, at least like, on the post-game show or whatever. But like overall, like there was okay. So what happened to Batherson in the second half to turn him red? A lot of bad variance in the second half. All right. He was shooting just 7%. His 5-on-5 on ice shooting percentage was 6.5%. His points participation rate was 58%. His 5-on-5 shooting percentage, his own shooting percentage, was just 4%. And then on the power play, Batherson was only getting in on about half of the goals scored while he was on the ice. He was only shooting 13% on the power play, which is less than we've been accustomed to seeing. There was struggles all around in the second half. The funny part about Batherson's season, which started better, like 35 points in 36 games, about point per game pace. Batherson might have been seeing some bad variance there too. Like his 5-on-5 on ice shooting percentage was 7%. His points participation rate was strong, but he was still himself just shooting like 4% at 5-on-5. But we didn't see as big an impact because Batherson was shooting 30% on the power play versus the 13% he was shooting on the power play in the second half, when Batherson was still shooting 4% at 5-on-5. So it was just more apparent when the power play goals were drying up. But Batherson also, like even at the start, point per game pace, seeing bad variance. And I actually like feel like, he was buoyed by that power play production. But the reason I think that Batherson, well, just forwards don't shoot 4% in the NHL. That's just, you're not going to last. But Batherson shot 12 or 13% at 5-on-5 over the 2 years before this one. And this season, even though his shooting percentage was a third of that, he shot more often and with higher threat. So Batherson ended the year with 22 goals. And I think like that easily, and I'm saying easily, it could have been 13 more goals. I'm not even joking. Like just some basic regression from god awful to like, yeah, career norm. And just like that, Batherson would be point per game again from like, if you normalize, if you regressed his second half percentages, and if you regress the first half percentages too, I think it could be above a point per game. So I wouldn't be turned off at all by Batherson's overall 62-point pace, which came from poor 5-on-5 shooting all year, plus a dead power play in the back half. He's someone that I hope I can grab for value at the draft table, because of A, of the bad second half, and B, because the first half, while it was good, it might not be as good as he's capable of.
Yeah, I think Batherson, some people might be listening to this and being annoyed at us for, pointing him out, because I think he could be a steal in drafts. Because I love those shots. And if you're saying there was so much bad variance, then I think there's definitely a really good chance. And the fact that he was able to hold the top power play all of last season, even with the stacked lineup, makes me confident that maybe he'll do it again. He's clearly pretty good there.
The forwards he's being taken around in our ADP. So he's being taken about 100th overall, like around Marchessault, Kopitar, Kuzmenko, Dubois, Nechas, Nichushkin. Yeah, I think he's above all of those guys. Like Scheifele is around 90, which is where Batherson's been taken in the last 5. He's seen a big bump over the last 5 mocks. So big bump up. So maybe that's about where I would grab him, in that like 80 to 90 zone.
I think an interesting comparison.
Like Huberdeau is being taken at 80th. Sorry to, like, we both talked at the same time, but Huberdeau is being taken at 80th. I think I'd take Batherson over him.
Yeah, I was looking at some other guys who were up high, like Nick Ehlers is taking around 85. I think that's like a fun comparison to guys who shoot a lot. I definitely think it's close. Like Jeff Skinner, I'm seeing at 78. I see that being a potential close comparison. Claude Giroux, his own teammate, I think there's value here for sure. Well, I guess we'll find out if we're wrong, but I'm pretty high on him as well. So we're on the same page.
Go Batherson.
Okay. Let's do one more, Brian. Let's go to the Sharks. Okay. A team in total turmoil. We talked about already how with Erik Karlsson being traded away, like we're worried already about like the team's ability to score. And let's throw into it the fact that Tomas Hertl is a red boy from last year. And I'm curious to know, at least to know if like Hertl's still good, even if he has no one to play with. I still just want to get a sense of who Tomas Hertl is at this point, because he started last year super great. Like all the guys we're talking about, 37 points in 39 games, so close to point per game ish for Hertl. Then in the second half, even though Karlsson continued to explode, somehow Hertl's production kind of dried up, and he only had 26 points in his final 40 games, which is not even like a 55-point pace. Like Hertl wasn't worth holding in Kakupful in the second half of the year. And like he's the top line center on the team. He's like locked in on a crazy long contract, which doesn't really make sense considering where the Sharks are at this point. But I guess they really want him as this leader through the rebuild. I don't know if Hertl would want to redo on that. But anyways, he's making big money. So I'm sure he's happy about that.
I think both sides of that were not sure what the next several years would hold, and didn't like completely foresee what was coming. They
should have been able to see. It was only like a year ago, and like Sharks were not looking that good. But anyway, Hertl ended the year like with a 65-point pace, but like I said, he started as like a point per game. He ended as like 55, and now next year there's no Erik Karlsson. So where does that leave us for Tomas Hertl next season? And what did happen in the second half last year?
Yeah, well, second half, I think Timo Meier was dealt. And after that, Hertl had 13 points in 18 games. He'd been a little cold before that, but I think that really cemented Hertl's fate as a red boy. Overall, Hertl had a 65-point pace for the season, which honestly, more or less, that's where he's been for 4 years now. Even like shot a little less this past year. So I don't know. Like I know I've been high on a lot of these guys, but Hertl's entering his age 30 season. He's like John Travolta in the meme, like looking around. Nobody's left in the room. I think 65 points is probably what I'd expect from Hertl again. So basically the red boy, I'm not wiping that from his record like I was willing to for some of these guys. I think that's probably where I'm gonna slot Hertl in again. Like I once saw a 70-point player in Hertl, an upside for more, but in a rebuild with Meier gone, with Karlsson gone, I'm more comfortable with 65, and 70 is probably the upside, but I wouldn't, like before it was 70 plus upside. Now it's 65, and maybe the upside is just capped at 70 for Hertl. I mentioned on like the mock draft episode, he's someone who seems to like, he's one of those centers we were talking about who keeps falling to me. And I don't want to end up with him in a lot of leagues. But at some point, of course, it's hard to resist. But yeah, I'm not high on Hertl, and I'm gonna take what I saw in that second half as being sure a bit of a cold streak, but also maybe a sign of things to come.
Yeah, like he was getting a ton of ice time last season for what it's worth. And I'm sure that will continue. Like by the end of last season, when people were being dealt, he had like a lot of 20 plus minute games. Like even I'm seeing a 21-minute plus game in the game log. So Hurdle, yeah, I don't know what they're gonna do. Hopefully they don't like injure him by playing him too much, because he used to have an injury history. So yeah, I guess I'm with you. Yeah, let's just even it out. Say he's a 65-point guy. The Sharks need to figure out on defense, right? They need someone who's going to be able to like run the power play, and like hopefully they have one of these prospects. I know people are into like Henry Thrun or Shakir. Like what? Hopefully one of them is going to be able to step up, because we've been having questions from the patrons being like, is it Mario Ferraro's season or is it Matt Benning season? Like if that's the case, that those guys are like running the top power play, then that does not make me excited for Tomas Hertl. That's for sure. Brian, this has been a blast. Once again, we've just been blabbing and blabbing. And next thing I know, a couple hours pass. And yeah, we've covered a ton of Red Boys. I hope that people have enjoyed this episode. Obviously, there's a lot more that we can get into, but at some point we have to cap it. But yeah, some other guys that were like, I don't know. I'll just throw some names out at you that are on the spreadsheet. Like Kuznetsov is there, who fell off. He's obviously in a very precarious situation, right? Because the Caps, like, they're trying to trade him. So who knows what's going to happen? This Sen, Dominic Kubalik, their new acquisition. People might not remember like how high he was. He was looking really good at the start of the year. I remember on short shifts they were talking about Kubalik all the time, and for good reason. Yeah. Anyway, there's some other names. I shared the sheet in the Discord, right? So if anyone's interested, you can find that or tag me if you can't find it. The Red Boys Green Boys spreadsheet. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. Also, you can find the link to the Cupful mock ADP in the spreadsheet, which is super handy. Like I think if you go into your Cupful draft and you're not looking at the mock, it's like that seems like a disservice to yourself. Like, why would you be looking at Fantrax ADPs when you could be looking at the ADPs from the actual people who you're going to be drafting against? So yeah, that and a lot more, right? We're having, like Brian said, we're having a lot of fun in the Discord. Come join us. But yeah, I hope you liked this episode. And I don't really have much else to say, Brian. So how about we thank everyone also for listening? Oh, we'd of course appreciate a 5-star review. I knew there was something, right? 5-star review. You got to say that. If you have a podcast and you're not asking for a 5-star review, I don't think you're doing it right. So yeah, we'd love it. It would really help us out. And yeah, with that, Brian, let's cue the outro music. Why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was powered by our patrons. We mean it. And presented by Dabra Hockey. Also powered by our super supporters, especially Aaron, Ivan, Andrea, Zach, Tom, Derek, David, Rob, Max, Ricard, and of course, Patty. Also, shout out to Stephen for he went annual and not quite like super supportive, but like tossed a little extra. So thanks for your support and everybody's support. We're working hard to get ready for the Cupful. Kevin Hebert is our Cupful coordinator. He's working hard, so thanks to Kevin. And there's like a lot of cool stuff that's already happening and going to keep happening. So if you're not in on the action, like, we don't say we didn't warn you. All right. Deadline September 1st to register to guarantee yourself a spot in the league. Elon and Shams, for what it's worth, are still retweeting all, like, I don't go to Twitter anymore. I go to gamedaytweets.com. That gives me all I need from Twitter without any of the headaches. So thank you, Elon and Shams, for keeping that going. Logo art by BrandonWeeb.com. Outro music by Pat Roach. This episode was researched with help from Dauber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dauber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, HockeyGoalies.org, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects. I'm going to shout out all the patrons doing mock drafts because that's where we have our ADP from. Kevin Hebert for making the sheet, and Fantrax for hosting them. That's it.
All right. Great job as always, Brian. Thanks for everyone who joined us live. Also, I'm seeing Andy, Mason, Joe was in the chat before, Shams, of course, Adam Camp. All right. Thanks to everyone. And Brian, what was the Oscar speech? Play some extra. We already have music playing, right?
That's my move to just name names.
I don't know. I felt like doing it. I don't know why. But yeah, what should we do? We've got some fun shows coming up. I think we're going to have that Dauber show pretty soon, potentially. We got good stuff. Make sure you're subscribed to Keeping Karlsson so you're gonna get all the good stuff that Brian mentioned at the start that is going to be coming out over the next month. These next couple months is like our bread and butter of Keeping Karlsson, right? The preseason I really love, and then also, of course, the actual season is so fun just every week to talk about who's hot, who's not, all of that, injuries, outjuries. But while we wait for all of that, Brian, what should we do as we finish off the last maybe boring week before we're going to get into some fun NHL news for the next few months.
With this episode, the week has not been boring. All right. I think we can just scratch that, but I get it. Like, how
well, if you go to gamedaytweets.com, like you said, the top tweet is that the Sabres have acquired Ilya Lyubushkin for who I'm probably even pronouncing that right, Lyubushkin, for a 4th round pick, which obviously is Shams. And like I remember I saw that news and I was like, should I even tweet that, or is that like even newsworthy? And I saw Shams had already retweeted and I was like, I guess there's something's better than nothing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the action's already happening here. The action elsewhere, I agree, will hopefully pick up. While you're waiting for it, please make sure you're doing all you can to make sure that fantasy hockey is for everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, pal. Good job.
You're gonna keep that in. You're gonna keep the seal.
Oh, every week I sometimes keep it, sometimes don't. I don't know.
I like it.
It's corny. I don't know.
Funny.
Well, this was great.
Good job. See ya, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Shams, yeah, gotta remind people we're around for sure. I was probably gonna tweet it. I don't know who he is. Ilya Lyubushkin.
He was a Coyote Leaf. He's been around.
All right, good. Well, good luck to him on the Sabres. The Sabres have acquired a lot of defensemen. Do they even have room for all these guys? Guess we'll find out.
I mean, like, considering that I think they're like fringe NHLers,
yeah,
they hope they have room.
Yeah.
All
right.
Okay.
See you, pal. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye. Good job.